Lahav, thank you so much for making time for this interview.
Pleasure.
Does it feel different this time around because you are here 10, 12 weeks a season? Suddenly we are at the final projects at the end of your tenure as chief conductor. Does it feel different or is it business as usual because there's just so much music?
No, it's not business as usual. I was actually very sentimental when I came here this week, but then I also reminded myself, okay, I'm doing my last concert in Rotterdam as chief conductor next week, and then there are two more concerts in Prague and Dresden, and then a week later Cologne, and then we go on tour in Taiwan, and then it will be very sad. And 1 month later, I'm coming back to do Verdi Requiem. So in fact,
You're forgetting Graveneck.
and there's Gaffeneck, sorry, of course, of course. And so, yeah, I mean, it means, in other words, the relationship goes on. If it's not anymore the title chief conductor, which I was very honored to receive for the first time in my life by the orchestra, but the friendship will be there. The musical understanding that we've built together for the last decade, that will remain. And I will be a dear friend and family member of this orchestra.
And this will be a first for you because this is the first time you say goodbye to an orchestra where you became chief conductor.
Yeah,
Because Rotterdam was the first orchestra you ever had. Do
sure.
you think it will change the relationship with the orchestra in terms of how you will work on programs? Because at some point there's maybe less of a expectation that is connected to a chief conductor or music director, or is that not the case at all?
I don't think about it at all. Of course, now as chief conductor, I was here very regularly, almost every month. And so the kind of work we've done was continuous. So if we worked on sound, for example, we could work on it in one program and the next month keep working on it, even if it was with a different composer. And now I will be here once a season, maybe twice a season, but it will be the same kind of work. But also at this point, we really know each other better. And the thing that doesn't change is the chemistry with the orchestra. That was here from the very first time, very first note, and that's here to stay also.
When was the last time you made a debut with an orchestra?
Oh, good question. I guess no, it wasn't the Munich Philharmonic. It's difficult to say. I don't know. I'm not doing so many debuts anymore. I'm very lucky, first of all, to have my own orchestras, which I'm very proud of, and I have a very good relationship with all of them. And basically, I'm very happy with these relationships that I have already. So I'm, you know, blind dates can be sometimes exciting, but I'm very happy to concentrate on the relationships that are already ongoing.
Because I wonder if, like your debut with the Munich Philharmonic, it was quite some years after your debut in Rotterdam. Um, do you have an actual recollection of the difference between the two debuts when you are maybe 6, 7 years older, more experienced? Do you go into a debut differently in the case of Munich compared to
I
Rotterdam?
I go with exactly the same nervosity.
Okay.
Debut is a debut, and it's a human thing. It has nothing to do with music. It's how would they feel in front of these people, and it's a group of people. Don't forget, you're not just meeting one person; you're meeting 100 at once, and you are the stranger. They all know each other. They like each other. They don't like each other. It doesn't matter. They're familiar with this environment, and you are new into this, and so you can never know. Are you going to be accepted? Are you going to be judged? You will be judged in any case, but is there a way in? Um, but usually what happens the moment we start making music, I forget about all of this, and the music becomes the main focus. And through the music, you start really getting to know the personalities in front of you, how much you can challenge them, how much they're willing to go with you. Um, so yeah, of course, there was a difference when I came to Munich for the first time. I came with much more experience and more reference in terms of repertoire, etc., etc. But it's still exciting when you meet an orchestra for the first time.
I still have a very clear memory of when you stepped into this very room for the very first time in 2016. If we go back to that very morning, is that still vivid in your memory?
Absolutely. I remember the first thing I did in the break was calling now my wife, Miri, at the time my girlfriend, and telling her, I know I'm not supposed to say this, but I really hope I can stay here. I hope they will offer me
The job
the job of chief conductor, because you're not supposed to, at least in my mind, you're not supposed to have this kind of wishes, this kind of dreams. I never had before, and but there was something in the connection. It was not about I'm going to make a career now, you know. It was just, oh, I met these people, I met this orchestra, and I just want to keep making music with them. I'm happy when I make music with them, and I want to do it more. That's where it came from.
That was the Pathétique Tchaikovsky.
Yeah.
What happened in that first hour? Can you describe it?
Oh, somehow there was an atmosphere. I remember I walked on stage, I was looking at the musicians. I remember certain faces, and I know exactly which musicians really caught my eyes immediately. The way they looked at me, the way I felt there is an immediate connection. Um, the way I felt that it's all about music now. What I said before about judgment, I didn't feel any of that. I just felt, yeah, let's do it.
A certain hungry.
Yeah, a hungry, openness to ideas, to emotions, to anything. And I love the sound immediately, and I love the flexibility. I love the fact that everything I have in my mind, I'm able to achieve here. And of course, I was inspired by the musicians and by their personality as a group, and different personalities inside. And yeah, I think we just did the first movement until the break, and I felt, well, that's how I want Tchaikovsky 6 to sound.
Did it help that you also did play conduct, playing piano and conducting at the same time in a Mozart concerto? Does that give you a different entrance into an orchestra?
Well, I suppose so. Although this feeling that I had, that I want to stay here, that was after the Tchaikovsky, not after I played the piano. But of course, it helps a lot. I mean, especially once there is a good connection with the orchestra, playing the piano and making this kind of collaboration, that adds a lot. Of course, it adds a lot to the understanding of how do I think about music, how do I imagine it, because they can actually hear it, and it adds a lot to the communication of just going together and not just waiting for someone to lead, or should I take the initiative, should he. We do it together in a collaboration like chamber music. So yeah, it adds a lot. Yes.
There were two concerts that week, Friday and Sunday. Was there a big difference between the two?
I don't remember.
Mm.
I you know, it's often like that when you go back in your memory, the things, periods become points.
Yes.
So the week is like one event for me at this point. I remember the feeling of going to stage. I remember the intermission, calling Miri, and I remember the discussion after the first concert, asking me if I'm willing to take the job, as I was dreaming. For a whole 3 days, I was dreaming about this.
It was unanimous. But let me rephrase. What was there in your mind an element of spontaneity in the concerts that you could do things differently from the rehearsals?
Yeah, of course. But that's a given. If I wouldn't have this feeling, then I wouldn't fall in love with the orchestra. It was exactly part of the reason that I felt there is such a connection that we can do everything and we can be spontaneous. And that's very, very important for me as a musician.
But then, if it feels so good, uh, what kind of concepts do you develop in your mind to um, develop the orchestra even further? If it's already so much there in the moment, how do you then set to work?
Well, every orchestra has a certain habits and has a certain approach in general to music making, to sound, to timing, etc., etc. And when you work for a long time with an orchestra, you start developing a mutual understanding. And it becomes less and less, let's make this week a really good week. And it becomes more, let's make our collaboration a really good one. So that anything we play, any repertoire, just starts from a different starting point. So when we start a piece, when a rehearsal week starts at this point, it's a very different feeling than when we started at the very beginning 10 years ago.
How would you describe that?
There's just a much more instant understanding. I would say it's much less effort. And because there is much less effort in understanding each other, you can put more effort in the expression and in the energy and finding colors and so on and dive into the piece. But you are concentrated maybe a little less with the basics, or even if you're still thinking about the basics, it comes much more naturally. People just get it right away. And today it feels, it doesn't matter which piece. I go on the stage. To me, it feels like I'm barely moving, and the musicians just read my mind. And that's a great feeling that you achieve after many years. At the beginning, it's not like that. You have to create it every time.
You have to move more.
Yeah. It's not just move more. You have to really make sure everybody understands exactly what you mean in your body language, in how you articulate yourself. And at this point, it feels like we just know each other. And knowing each other, I don't mean like there is a routine, like, oh, we play this like that. No, it means like we understand how we're thinking about music and what are the possibilities and what are the expectations. And then we just fly together.
Are you able to put in words the sound of the Rotterdam Philharmonic, both when you first encountered them and how they are today playing under you?
Um, yes, although it's an orchestra that is very flexible with their sound. In other words, they don't play Mozart, Haydn, or Bach the way they would play Shostakovich. No orchestra does, but still, they are very conscious about style and about different sounds and how to play French music, how to play German music, Russian music, Baroque, contemporary. Um, and this flexibility, you can also you can hear it in the tone of the orchestra. In other words, it's not an orchestra that plays too harsh. Um, it's an orchestra that can really fly, you know. They have this wonderful delicacy in their sound, which is a little more French in a way, but not entirely, because it's very, very difficult to describe it exactly in words. But that's why we make music and don't talk about it.
In the end, that is much preferred, of course. I was so often sitting in the hall being completely amazed by all of the firsts you have done in Rotterdam, which did not feel like your first time at all. I'm talking about maybe Bruckner's 8th Symphony or Mahler's 9th Symphony and many more examples like that. For you to prepare a score for the first time and to do it with an orchestra that you're familiar with, that must be very helpful, I imagine. But does it for you feel like a first, or do you already have such a strong idea of the structure of a symphony that it does feel more natural how it flows on stage in the concerts.
You mean when I do a piece for the first time with the
Yes.
orchestra? Well, of course, you analyze the music at home, but many things you can only experience when you hear the sound coming right at you, and when there is this collaboration. It's very different than listening to a recording, let's say. You can study a piece for months, and there are things you will only discover when you hear it. Not because you don't understand the harmonies and who has the important line and so on. It's just how things connect to each other, and the reality of sound. It's very different than what's on your mind. Although with the years, of course, you're getting closer and closer to reality. You can imagine it better. Still, you have to be able to listen the moment, in the moment of truth. And that's true about anything you do in music, about timing, about sound. If you plan too much ahead of time and you don't really listen and you're not really in the moment, you're missing a lot, I believe. Some people, for example, they look at the metronome marking and they try to be very exact with the metronome. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying if you do that, you decisively ignoring the acoustics of a whole and this psychological element of music making. And I think that should come first before you're trying to be exact with metronome marking. If you play a short chord here and you play a short chord in another hole, it sounds very different. There is a different resonance. If you let it ring, it means you need to wait a little, so on. So these things are not to be analyzed. You have to be there. And in the first time, of course, it needs a lot of concentration.
Do you sometimes feel the tension between wanting to respect the wishes of the composer, wanting to implement your own idea about it, and also wanting to respect the ideas the musicians have? Because these can be three different things, of course.
I never come with the intention to put my own ideas on the music. Never, ever. And if I change things and it happens that there is a mezzo forte in the score and I tell the orchestra, it's play piano, don't play mezzo forte. It's not because this is my idea. It's because I'm reading the score and I want to differentiate. I say, okay, this is an important voice. If it's played in this dynamic and the other instrument plays the same dynamic, we will not hear, the balance is not right. So what is more important? To be exact, there is no such a thing as exact dynamic. It's all relative in any case. You need to understand what's important here, what's the essence of the music, what's the essence of this particular passage, and to make sure it comes to reality, you know? But it's not because, oh, I have a better idea. The composer, he doesn't know. I will make it better. It's not about this. It's about, making these black dots, make it come to life. It's a hard job.
Might some musicians have a better idea, and then how do you resolve that kind of?
Also, very often musicians, they have suggestions or they say, could we do it like that and so on. And I'm open to ideas. I'm flexible. And I know if something is not right and doesn't fit what I believe is the concept of the music, then I will say, explain why not. I will never say that, no, just do what I say. The musicians playing on the stage, they have to be as convinced as I am when they play, if not more than me.
That's a good point.
They're making the music. I'm with them, of course. I'm also making the music with them, but they're producing the sound. If they're not 100% convinced, nobody else will be.
Do you think of the audience also in performance?
I don't think about it. I'm aware of it, I can feel it, but I'm not playing to please anyone else. Because, 2,000 people, can you please all of them? Can you please some of them? Somebody thinks it's too fast, somebody else thinks it's too slow. I can only judge myself, and I can only imagine, if I would now listen to this, do I accept this? Do I think this is the correct way? And I hope enough people think the same way.
I'm sure they are. But it's interesting, huh? This dialogue, which is in a way not a dialogue because it goes one way until the applause sends the approval the other way. It's still very different from like what we experience in the COVID times to play for sometimes 20 people, sometimes for an empty hall, and to do a stream for people sitting at home. So I do imagine that it is a huge added factor that 2,000 people can be in one room silently listening to the music that you are making.
Oh, sure, it's a performance. It's a performance, and look at any kid. You know, if you're doing sports or if you're preparing something at home and you do it alone over and over again, and then just one person watching you changes everything. Sometimes what you've just done 100 times in a row, you cannot do anymore because somebody's watching. It's a factor, of course, it's a performance. Somebody's watching, there are expectations, you need to deliver. To me, it creates a tremendous excitement and a lot of inspiration because I want to perform this music. I want it to be heard and loved by other people. I don't just do it for myself. I want to convince other people that listen to this Schoenberg Verklärte Nacht. Isn't it the most marvelous thing you have ever heard? I cannot just be there and do what's written and basta. I really want to convince.
You mentioned nerves when encountering an orchestra for the first time. Do you have nerves on stage for concerts?
No, concerts are for me a moment of liberation. The moment to stop thinking about details and balance and putting things together and it's not together. Huh? Liberate yourself. It's all about the music and about the flow and the expression and feeling the whole structure at once, which you can only do when you perform a piece from beginning to the end. And the attention, the concentration that is felt, you know, there is a very big difference between silence of an empty space and silence of 2,000 people sitting, not speaking. That has tension, good tension.
And it's much more fun than rehearsing.
Yeah, fun. I mean, it's fun to play through the music and not stop every every couple of seconds. But yeah, of course, it's fun to perform for a great public like here that is attentive and listening and understanding with a great hall. Sure.
You mentioned the stylistic diversity of the orchestra, which I of course recognize very much. And you did so many different programs here in Rotterdam in the past 8 to 10 years, since you started. We also included some very nice jazz programs, for example. Do classical musicians ideally need to play more towards this jazz genres, maybe other sorts of musical genres? Does it help them to also play better the classical canon from Mozart to Mahler, let's say?
I don't know if playing jazz helps you playing Mozart better, but I find it very interesting and just a gift that today you can do more than one thing, more than one style of music. And to me, it's more about curiosity and about experiencing. You know, we're here on this planet for a short time, and if all you want to do is concentrate on one thing, then go ahead. But my personality is so that I'm curious about many things, and definitely inside of music, I'm curious about different things. And as a child, my dream was to be a jazz pianist, well, at least for a few years. Um, so if I'm able to do that, of course, not in the level of a professional jazz pianist, but if I can combine it and experience it, taste it a little, then why not? I think it adds so much to you later in everything you do.
It opens your world. I remember a program where we had the Rotterdam Philharmonic and the WDR big band on stage together.
With my brother playing saxophone.
And your brother playing saxophone. That was one of the highlights for sure for me also. But I noticed how much the musicians also inspired each other and were in awe of each other.
Oh, yeah.
In very different aspects of the music making, of course.
Yeah. It feels almost like, well, not a different profession, but you hear somebody else playing the same instrument, but doing things that you can only dream about. And then you say, how do they do it? And then it's your turn, and you just do something that you feel is very easy and simple, and they have exactly the same awe effect, you know? I remember, yeah, it was really a great moment to experience these great, great ensembles. They've had a big band with the Rotterdam Philharmonic on stage. Very inspiring.
Do you listen a lot to non-classical in your free time?
I'm not listening so much to music anymore in my free time because there's less free time, and in my free time I try to spend as much as I can with my family, and with my young daughter especially. So sometimes on the airplane, hotel, sure, but I have music all day long around me. Thank God, so it's enough.
Sometimes you prefer a podcast, maybe.
Sometimes, yeah.
It must have an impact on, of course, everybody's life, but in a very specific way on a conductor's life to become, in your case, a father. Because conductors, almost more than any profession, travel so much, constantly, every week in another place. How did that impact your life specifically?
Well, first of all, when she was born, I stopped everything for a few months. And yes, it's a challenge in terms of finding the free time and traveling, of course. But my God, I mean, it made life so much happier, so much sunshine. So yeah, we're living with this challenge, and we are constantly finding the right ways with enough help. Of course, it's very important to have people helping you because you cannot do it yourself. She's traveling with me very often, I would say 90% of the time. Now she was with me, my wife and my daughter were both with me on tour in Japan, in Taiwan, and Korea, and she loves it. She's 2 years old, and somehow it's very natural to her.
That someday she will become a conductor. We
Or
all
a pilot.
Or a pilot. Maybe even better. You wanted to be a pilot, no?
It's true, yeah.
What happened?
I became a musician.
Can we talk about your farewell program? It's a beautiful program. It's a long program, and you really wanted a long program because...
Well, I didn't want a long program,
Well,
but
you-
I
you
wanted
did-
all these components there.
Tell us a bit about the program.
Well, let's say the main piece of the evening is Mahler's Fourth Symphony. So of course Mahler goes with me since I started my career, since the Mahler competition, and was a very central composer in our relationship also with the orchestra. We've done quite many Mahler symphonies, and this particular symphony that ends in Paradise, speaking about music and music in Paradise, I think it's maybe the best farewell possible. And with us is Chen Rice, my dear friend, who was also an artist in residence with the orchestra a few
The
years
famous
ago.
soprano.
Famous soprano. She will be singing the this in the symphony, and at the beginning of the program, we play a piece together with piano, sopran, and orchestra by Mozart. Kio miscordi dite? Will you forgive? will you forget me? It's an open question. I'm asking the orchestra. Will you forget me, or please don't?
I'm sure they won't. I'm sure they won't.
But it's also a good opportunity once more to play the piano with the orchestra, and it's again a Mozart, like, very first program. And then there are two more pieces, one by a Dutch composer named Wagenaar. It's one of the famous names in the Concertgebouw of the Dutch composers. And this piece is called Cyrano de Bergerac. It's an overture, which we've recorded with the orchestra. The recording will be released at the end of the month now with Warner. We also played it on tour in Japan, and it was very, very well received by the public. I think it's a great piece from 1900, very much in the style of young Strauss, very communicative, very virtuosic, sparkling. And I really like it. I really fell in love with it, and so did the musicians of the orchestra. I thought we should play a Dutch piece for my farewell concert. And then I thought we should also do one commission. It's, as you mentioned, already a big program, so it's not a very long piece. But I thought who could do a commission that would be really special. And of course, we thought about some of the greatest living composers today. But we had an idea to approach probably the youngest of the successful composers these days. It's a young Georgian boy, Tsotne Zedginidze. And I met him for the first time when he was 12 years old, which was not a very long time ago. It was, I believe, 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. And he played for me on the piano 30 or 40 minutes of his own music, which I thought was absolutely extraordinary, because this was not just the music of a wunderkind who writes like the second-rate Mozart or second-rate Mendelssohn, but this was a young 21st century composer in front of me. That for him, really going back in time, for him, old-fashioned would be Shostakovich. That's where it starts. And then, of course, it's Alban Berg and Bartok and Penderecki and, the great 20th century composers into the 21st. He's studying now with Jörg Widmann in Berlin. And I thought it would be a good opportunity for him to write his very first piece for a big orchestra, for a Mahler-sized orchestra, and for us to really experience something with the new generation of composers and give him an opportunity.
To really focus in your farewell program on the future.
Yeah.
Which is a very nice thought. What I also very much liked is that you coached Sotne a little bit in specifically the instrumentation.
Yeah.
Because you've sometimes said that composers don't always get enough opportunity to try out things, maybe even compared to past centuries. And it's a craft, and they could learn so much more also from the input from conductors, for example.
Yes, and in the past, I think almost all composers were conducting also. It was not really possible to write music for a big symphonic orchestra if you never stood in front of an orchestra and really felt it yourself. Of course, there are exceptions. Schubert, Bruckner, maybe in his earlier years. But generally, it was so. Mahler, of course, is the best example of great orchestrator, not just a great composer. And yes, I wanted Sotne to have this experience with a great orchestra. And in fact, we've invited him. He came here a few times to Rotterdam to attend the rehearsals, but also to meet the musicians. And I told him, write a few lines to each of the musicians, pick a few instruments that you want, write a miniature piece, and they will play it to you. And they did. They gave him feedback. They showed him different ways, how it sounds with sordino, how it sounds when you mute with your hand, etc., on every instrument. And I think he learned a lot from it. I wish I had this kind of school when I was his age.
Did that inspire you to maybe consider making time, whenever there is time, to be a composing conductor yourself?
Oh, I need a lot of time for this. A lot of time. I'm not completely against the idea, but I don't think it will happen in the very near future. I'm still young.
Not as young as Tzopne.
No, it's true.
You did
But
some wonderful arrangements, which we also
thanks.
recorded.
Yeah, the arrangements are my way to compose because it takes much less time, of course. You don't need to sit down, wait for a good idea to come and develop it. It's all there, and you can color it your way. And by the way, by doing this, I learned a lot myself about the orchestra. So it was also a learning experience for me.
Because composing, it's also about inspiration, aside from finding time.
Yes, but I think it's very little percent inspiration and very high percent of hard work. Hard work, putting things together, eliminating what's not important enough, making it better, changing your idea, making a better structure, making things clearer. That's the most of the of the work at the end. The inspiration can be an idea. It can come in one moment and then you work for months because of this little moment of inspiration.
And then, as you said earlier in the interview, very luckily, only weeks after your last official concert in Graveneck in the summer festival as the chief conductor, you return as honorary conductor, and you do something which I'm very happy about again for the first time. And I'm convinced that again, I will not believe that it was your first time. And it's a huge work. It's the Verdi Requiem. Why did you choose this?
Why not?
You haven't conducted one bar of Italian music in Rotterdam,
It's true.
so that's a good reason to do it, of course.
Yeah, start from the top.
But Verdi, it's so different from Mahler or Bruckner. Uh, does it also require a different approach, or is it in the end the same kind of basic needs that all good music requires?
Yes, well, but as I said before, the orchestra really has a way to put themselves in the shoe of every composer. They don't try to sound like the Rotterdam Philharmonic. They want to sound like Beethoven or like Verdi or like Prokofiev. And when they do it with their personality and their way and their approach, they do sound like the Rotterdam Philharmonic. And to me, that's what makes music making so beautiful, that no matter how much you try to be loyal to the composer and to do things the right way and so on. At the end, it's also about the personality that makes it different, you know? Because I'm convinced in a certain way, but another conductor is convinced in a very different way. And it's a good thing. It's good that you're not just repeating the same thing over and over again, but you keep learning and you keep experiencing the same material, the same music from different angles. It's exciting.
Talking of personalities, on your second program as honorary conductor next season, we will have the happily expected return of Marta Argerich, and we owe it to you a big deal that she is a frequent guest in Rotterdam, playing here more than anywhere in the Netherlands for sure. Uh, even anywhere in the world, you could almost argue.
Well, and I think she's the soloist that also played with us the most over the last decade. She came almost every year, I believe.
Incredible. She has a very strong personality, both on and off stage. And it strikes me how incredibly well you adapt to her needs and her genius.
I don't feel like I need to adapt to her. I feel we have such a good relationship. We really became friends over the years, and musically we totally feel each other, totally immersed in each other's minds and ideas. I find it actually very easy to make music with her. It's very natural. I don't find myself need to adjust everything to make it right for her.
It's very interesting because she's also very spontaneous.
Yes, but so am I.
So are you.
And so is the orchestra.
Yes.
So that's why it's a good match.
Maybe that's the secret then. But you also have a way of, let's say, reassuring her. Sometimes she needs some reassurance to go on stage, for example.
Well, yes, but that's natural, can happen to anyone. But it's a strong relationship, and yeah, I mean, you wouldn't think someone like Marta Argerich need reinsurance, but reassurance. Everyone is a human being, and I love her. What can I say?
Bruckner's also on that program, the Sixth Symphony, another first for you. Why don't we hear this symphony so often? Because we play 5 and we play 7 and 8, but somehow we tend to skip the sixth.
I'm not sure why. I think it's a wonderful symphony, especially the first and especially the second movement, the slow movement. Wonderful. No good reason. I think also the Fifth Symphony is not played nearly as much as it should be played. Maybe because it's very long, because of the double fugue in the last movement. Who knows? But I do it. I like it.
Well, we have many, many more repertoire that we need to do with you at some point, and luckily, as you say, you're still young. What is highest on your list for the next years as honorary conductor of the Rotterdam Philharmonic? Because
I can tell you, but it costs a lot.
maybe off the record then.
Yeah, the most important thing is that I keep coming here to my dear friends every year, and we will keep going.
What are you going to miss the most? Like, apart from the people, obviously.
Just this feeling of everything is possible, of this flexibility and the chemistry with the orchestra, the happiness I feel when I walk into these doors and I see them. But I will not miss it so much because I will be here. I'll try to make it as often as I can.
There will come a point at some point when we find finally a successor, although it's big shoes to fill. What will be your advice to your successor?
Oh, my advice to my successor: enjoy your time. It's the best time.
Thank you.
Pleasure.